Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice Hughes. Over the next hour, you'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Donna Rice Hughes, and thank you for joining our Internet Safety Podcast. Today, we're talking about TikTok, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what you need to know as an American and also as a parent. We have two very special guests and experts on TikTok. And there aren't that many experts, and we've got two of them here for you today. First is Jeffrey Payne. Jeff is the author of The Perfect Police State, an undercover odyssey into China's terrifying surveillance dystopia of the future, and a best-selling author of books on technology and business around the globe. His awards include the long list for the Financial Times and the McKinsey Business Book of the Year Award, the NPR Book of the Day, and the best nonfiction book in international affairs from the Overseas Press Club. That's a lot of awards, Jeff. He's also a regular guest on Fox News, CNN, NPR, and Bloomberg Television, and now the Internet Safety Podcast. He's a former advisor of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he regularly testifies before Congress on the threat of the Chinese and TikTok. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Donna.
Our next expert is a longtime friend of mine and a colleague for, almost 25 years. His name is Rick Lane. He is a tech policy expert, child safety advocate, and the founder and CEO of Iggy Ventures. Iggy advises and invests in companies, projects, and public policy initiatives that can positively impact society. Rick served as 15 years as the Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs for 21st Century Fox, which is when Rick and I met. And he has served in leadership positions on the federal, state, and local level, commissions, committees, including participating in the United States Trade Representatives Joint Government Private Sector Committee on Experts. All right, I'm not going to go through all of that because it's a bit of a tongue twister, but he also served on the Federal Trade Commission's Advisory Council or Committee on Online Access and Security. And Rick, welcome. It's great to have both of you.
Thank you, Donna.
So we said we're going to be talking about TikTok, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But we're going to start with the bad and the ugly. First, a few stats. 51% of U.S. teens spend at least 4 hours a day on social media, according to Gallup in 2023. TikTok surpassed non-Facebook apps with 3 billion downloads. Rick, Jeff, you've got a lot more stats than I do. What do you want to share on this before we roll into the threat and the connection with China?
So the threat of TikTok, I think it has been very well established now. There is no question about it. You know, before, if you were to dial back the clock about a year ago, people on the Hill, people in DC were saying, are you sure that this is really a threat? Are you sure that there's really a problem here? Because it's just an app that Gen Z is using. They're scrolling through it. They're watching their cat videos. They're watching this or that celebrity. Who cares? Just let them have fun. Well, in the past few years, a lot of evidence has come out that absolutely implicates TikTok with being under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, the world's biggest police state, a one-party authoritarian state that has put 1.8 million people in concentration camps, that has threatened American national security, and that is also a very, unfortunately, a very addictive app that's being used by teenagers and kids in America. This is under the control of a foreign malign power, and what this means is that the Chinese Communist Party, if it wants, can use TikTok to manipulate people in America. This isn't a question of speculation. It's not, might this happen? Could it happen? The fact of the matter is that under Chinese law, this is under their very own laws, people in China who are summoned by the government, in particular by the Ministry of Public Security, which is the Chinese police force, they are required to hand over data, to hand over intelligence, including intelligence as it relates to Americans. So anybody who works at TikTok or its parent company ByteDance in China is subject to Chinese law, and that Chinese law says that they can, one, manipulate foreign powers, manipulate people in foreign countries, and to take that data and give it to the government there. So that's what we know. It's very clear. It's in writing. It's not something that is being hidden in China. It's not something that the Chinese government tries to cover up. They have stated publicly that they see TikTok as an arm of China, and that is what they want to use it for.
And I'll just add to that, Donna, what's really scary is that 2/3 of teenagers use TikTok, according to Pew. So that means you have a lot of young minds that are being influenced by an entity that is being controlled by the CCP. But even more scary is that 40% of people who are on TikTok get their quote news from TikTok. So instead of going to CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or pick any of your newspapers, 40% of the users of TikTok are getting their news from TikTok, what they perceive as news. And even more scary is that the ages from 18 to 29, it's 32% get their news from TikTok. So what TikTok puts out becomes truth. And we know that the CCP's goals and the Chinese goals is to undermine our democracy. And they have access to 170 million Americans with a tool that can weaponize data and put out any type of propaganda or disinformation that they want when they see fit. And there is ample evidence that that is already happening.
Right. And I love the quote that Congressman Mike Gallagher said. He said, at the best case scenario, TikTok is CCP spyware. We know they're using this tool. It's really a Trojan horse, isn't it? Disguised as fun, dance videos, singing videos, show off your whatever to anyone in the world videos. But it really is combining both censorship and propaganda. And this is a bipartisan issue, isn't it?
Absolutely bipartisan, and the amount of bipartisanship on this bill was really impressive. Rick, I think that you were in DC when all this was happening. I haven't been in DC recently. I go down occasionally, but I have been following the bill and been involved in some of the discussions around the bill, some of the testimony that was going on. And there is unity on both the right and the left. Everybody has now realized that TikTok is a major threat. It's a Trojan horse. It's a major app that's being used. As Rick said, it's the main news source and the only news source for so many of our kids, and it's being used to manipulate people. So just to give an example, so this new bill that has gone through, which is a divestment bill that's going to require TikTok to separate from its parent company, ByteDance. So when this bill was first going through about 2 months ago, TikTok sent out a message to all of its creators. It was a message that popped up, and it said that there's a big warning here, there's something bad happening, that Congress wants to ban TikTok, that you need to call your congressman, you have to try to stop this bill from going forward. Well, it was misinformation. It wasn't even true, because the bill is not a ban, it's a divestment, it's a separation of the parent company from the American subsidiary. The only ban that will happen is if they refuse to follow the law. Then, they have 9 months, and then they will be taken off the app stores. So with this misinformation, TikTok was able to mobilize this massive fan base of creators that they have. There were teenagers and kids as young as 9, I've heard, who were calling up congressional offices and literally threatening to kill themselves if they could no longer get access to TikTok. They literally said that they want to die, that this is their lifeline, that they need TikTok, and Congress needs to stop trying to, quote unquote, ban TikTok, even though they're not banning TikTok. So that just right there gives you a sense of the influence and the power that this app now has over a lot of our youth. The fact that they can mobilize people based on a lie, an outright lie, and get kids to threaten suicide should show just how dangerous this app is.
Rick, tell us about what you're doing, because this was a seed that everyone said we couldn't get done. And you were one of the leaders on the Hill. In fact, you started the TikTok Coalition. So take us from, tell us about the bill, or expand on what Jeff just shared, and where it is now, and exactly how this is going to work now that President Biden has signed this into law.
Sure, happy to. And the reason it's called the TikTok Coalition and not the Ban TikTok Coalition, because the goal of the legislation was not to ban TikTok. It was to ban ByteDance and ban the CCP from getting access to US users through TikTok. And so we were very careful even on the name of the coalition. But the coalition was an ad hoc group of individuals, no companies or corporations. A lot of people said, oh, this is Meta funding this. And I can tell you, Donna, you've worked with me long enough to know that I'm not working with Meta or Google. But a group of folks across the country who were national security experts who saw the concerns that I had raised back in 2020, which is how people started reaching out to me, because that's the first time I wrote about the national security concerns of TikTok during the first Biden, we'll call it Biden Trump 1 versus Biden Trump 2 coming up. And they were just really concerned and worked with us. They got some tremendous amount of data points of what was happening on TikTok in terms of its misinformation campaign and disinformation campaign. And that was presented to members on the Hill. And I think you saw the impact of that, I've never seen a bill of this caliber and of this importance move so quickly. But when you have a 50-0 vote coming out of the House Commerce Committee, I think that says a lot. And a lot of that was attributed to what Jeffrey was just talking about, which was when the national security individuals from the White House came up to brief the Commerce Committee members about the national security threat of TikTok and how it could be used by the Chinese government to manipulate public opinion and foreign policy and our national security. Their offices were being bombarded by young kids, not just threatening to kill themselves, but to kill members of Congress. And so they walk out of this with this, there's one thing where you're saying this may happen, and they're, going back to their offices, watching it real time. And that scared the heck out of them. And it was exactly what we knew could happen, how this powerful communications tool could be used. And TikTok, I think, too, really made a really bad public policy decision or strategy decision to show us exactly the power. So imagine, what would happen if China decided to invade Taiwan and the power that they could have of kids protesting in the streets. I mean, you see a lot of that happening on college campuses now. And a lot of that is driven by what they're hearing and seeing on TikTok.
Let's talk about how they are using our data. They are collecting information on anyone who uses TikTok. How are they using that data? And why should parents and anyone, any business, any NGO, any politician, and there are a lot of them using TikTok to reach those audiences, why should they be concerned?
Well, I think to answer that question, let me take you over to China. So a country I lived in for many years, speak Chinese. I had been an investigative journalist in China for many years before I was back in America. So over in China, ByteDance, so Douyin it's called, is one of the largest social media networks in the country. All of the American social media networks, Facebook, Instagram, all these websites, Twitter, they're all blocked in China. You can't even use them. So over in China, I was there in 2017. I was documenting the rise of ByteDance and specifically looking at how ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, was directly involved in the Uyghur genocide in the west of China. So the Uyghur genocide is a genocide against a group of people who oppose the Chinese government, oppose the Chinese Communist Party. It's the largest internment of a group since the Holocaust. So we're talking 2 million people who've gone to concentration camps. ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, was deeply involved in creating a lot of the propaganda that allowed this to happen. They had a contract with the Chinese police force, the Ministry of Public Security, to spread propaganda about people, to gather data on them, to monitor them, and to use that information. That information was then used by the police to take away people in the middle of the night. You get a knock on your door, the police would be there. They would say something completely ridiculous. They would say that according to the data that we have gathered on you, and this data is coming from everywhere. It's coming from Douyin, from ByteDance. It's coming from other sources, from all the cameras all over the country. There are cameras in people's living rooms now. That's how intense this surveillance is getting. And the police would say, You had the flu the other day. You didn't get a doctor's note. You didn't go to work. You didn't have a doctor's note. So therefore, we suspect that you are a terrorist and you're being charged with a pre-crime. They literally say that you're going to commit a crime in the future and you have to be taken to a camp, which will it'll be your brainwashing project. You're going to spend usually it's 7 years. That's what they say. You spend 7 years in a camp. You go through daily rituals in which you have to expurgate yourself of any kind of independent thought, and you have to swear allegiance to the Communist Party of China. Once you show that you have given up your individuality, your ability to think, and also to read, they burn a lot of books in this region too. It's really dystopian. It's like Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. It really is just freakishly disturbing. They let you out after you show sufficient loyalty, and you can go back, hopefully to your normal life. But you've just been so degraded and tortured that most people are never normal again. ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, was directly involved in making this atrocity happen. I mean, this is something that the Chinese Communist Party does without even thinking about it. It's normal for them. This is who they are. This is what they've always done. They've done it all throughout their history. They've been involved in all kinds of mass mayhem, all kinds of genocidal acts in China, and also all kinds of hostile acts against other countries around the world. ByteDance is a part of this apparatus. ByteDance runs an internal Chinese Communist Party committee, and the reason for having this committee, a lot of Chinese companies have this, is to enforce the ideology of communism throughout the company. They're loyalty checkers. They want to make sure that their employees are not veering too far from the right ideology. And even the founder of ByteDance, a man named Zhang Yiming, he has gone on the record. He has written a letter to the Chinese Communist Party that was published, and it says that he swears his loyalty to the party and that he will do more to ensure that his company, ByteDance, spreads socialist values, that it spreads Chinese Communist Party values, and that it enforces this ideology. So that right there tells you all you need to know. This is what they're doing in China, and this is what they plan to do overseas. Why do we take TikTok at its word when they say we're a separate company? We have nothing to do with China. This is what TikTok is trying to say. They're saying, don't listen to any of that. It doesn't matter. It's completely separate from what's happening over here in America. But we know that that's false because there's a lot of data transfer happening between China and America. There are so many employees from China and America who are crisscrossing between the two countries. We know very clearly and with a lot of evidence that TikTok and ByteDance are not separate companies, and ByteDance controls TikTok. It's literally in their corporate structure, and they've stated publicly that they want to spread Chinese Communist Party propaganda. That's what they're doing.
Let me go to you, Rick. Thank you for that, Jeff. In this bill about separating TikTok from ByteDance, first of all, do you think this is going to happen? And if it does, how much influence could ByteDance in China still have over TikTok?
I think this is what makes this a national security bill versus what we're working on, Donna, like on KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, and general privacy legislation that's out there. Those bills would not address what Jeff was just talking about in terms of China and its use of TikTok. And to put even a finer point, TikTok does not exist in China at all. It's Douyin. And that is their version. And their version of Douyin is really educational videos. There's time limits. They're not selling illegal drugs and fentanyl like they do on TikTok, where you can buy fentanyl and illegal drugs on TikTok. There's none of the other type of hate crime or things that are horrible and undermining our democracy. But even worse, issues in the geopolitical realm that are of interest to China, like Hong Kong, the Hong Kong protests, the Uyghur comments, that we were just hearing about, India, Kashmir, all these different things are geopolitical. We have data from Rutgers University that shows whatever the version of that information wants to be from the China perspective completely outweighs any other. So for example, on Uyghur content and positive Uyghur and what's happening in terms of the genocide, it basically does not exist on TikTok. where on Instagram, there's like 570,000 posts and hashtag posts on Uyghur, on pro-Uyghur. So they're controlling. Same thing with, they said, the Hong Kong protests. So they're already manipulating. And I think is what's important to know is the difference between the different platforms, between a TikTok, an Instagram, and a Facebook. Because with Facebook, Facebook is a friends type platform. Donna, you and I are friends. I see your post. Jeffrey and I are not. I don't see his. With Instagram, it's a followers post. So I'll follow you, Donna, and I'll see what you're doing, but I won't follow Jeff, and I won't see what's happening. I won't see his post. TikTok is a broadcaster. They are showing you what they want to show you. And that's the power. They're able to show 170 million people, no matter whether they're friends or followers, the content that they want to show at any specific time of the day based on the interactions of their users. So this is where the harm comes in from a national security standpoint for our kids and for the users of TikTok, is that they are the power of generative AI is human interaction, right? It's not just where I live, or the color of my car, but what drives me, what makes me tick, right? What sets me off? What colors? What type of music? What beats of music do I listen to when I work out and gets me energized? And being able to customize that to target individuals on an issue that is important to get them excited about it or depress their interest in it. And they can do that with incredible, powerful algorithms that are based on the same algorithms that is generating for Danu, Douyin, and all based on the ByteDance algorithms. They're powerful algorithms, the same one. So they're using all this data of human interactions of the United States to be able to target our kids at a time they see fit. It's basically a weaponized set of, I like a data as bullets, right? You have a bunch of bullets stored in Texas now. That's your thing. All the data is stored in Texas. So don't worry about it. They have an arsenal of data stored in Texas that can be weaponized through their algorithm. And they have a gun called our phones pointed at every 170 million Americans that they can put and say, this is what we want you to do. And they know your vulnerabilities. They know your interests. They know who your friends are. And they can create a massive sense of hysteria, as we saw when the legislation was moving through Congress, and get people to do things that they would not normally do. And that's the threat to our children, and that's the threat to our democracy.
The algorithms have been described as godlike, right? Godlike. They're able to identify what you like and what you don't like within minutes of creating a
milliseconds.
Yeah, milliseconds. It's highly addictive, enslaving teens worldwide. And the Wall Street Journal said that just within seconds, as you said, they can take you down deep into these rabbit holes that are very hard to escape.
Janet, can I just clarify that? It's not rabbit holes. Rabbit holes are things you fall into. I describe them as black holes. They suck you into a darkness until you can no longer see the light. And that's different than falling in and you kind of trip into it. But they are pulling you into a deeper and deeper and deeper place of harm. And that's why we see kids who are vulnerable on suicide, weight loss, cutting themselves, or terrorism or other things. It sucks them in like a black hole. So I think it would be nice if it was just a rabbit hole and you just fell into it, but they're sucking these kids in.
And I think it's very telling what quote unquote TikTok looks like in China. It turns off at 10. It's age verified. Kids under 15 can't get it. And they are serving up their audience exactly what they want them to know. However, here, we did a town hall with the Virginia Attorney General, Jason Mayoras, and he said this was demonstrated to him, and I'm just going to describe it. They set up an account of a quote-unquote fake 15-year-old girl, and within moments, the first videos that came up with were how to date an older man, how to use a sex toy, and a self-harm video. Right away. Are they intent on destroying our youth?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I have done with my team the same exact tests. We have done comparisons between TikTok in America, setting up a fake profile as a 13 or 14-year-old, and then we use Douyin in China. So we have a VPN system that we've set up, and through some of our friends in China who we've got to keep anonymous because they're not supposed to be doing this, we're able to get access to Douyin in China and see what's accessible there and what's not. So whenever we put comparable keywords in the American and the Chinese version, so in the American version, we'll put some of the hashtags that are common in these circles. So one of them is strip talk, which is like TikTok for strippers. We want to see if that hashtag works when you're a 13-year-old searching for stripper content. No problem. Strippers everywhere. It's like you just scroll through and every hashtag it's like people teaching you how to pole dance, people wearing these skimpy bikinis. We're pretending to be a 13-year-old and there is no filter on that, and we're just completely shocked. The other one that we've tried is called Coke Talk, so cocaine and drug advice. We've gone through a good deal of TikTok and seen, as a 13-year-old and as a 15-year-old and on various other ages, we have universally been able to get access to instructions on how to do drugs, how to sort out your cocaine, how to put your heroin needle together. People just they're just giving these instructions openly, and you can access it as a teenager. In Douyin in China, we've gone in there, nothing. It's blank canvas. It's censored. It is every time you punch these keywords in Chinese and you want to load instructions on how to do drugs, we get a police notice, and it's like a cartoon. So they have a cartoon policeman, and he's standing there waving. He's like making a stop sign in front of you, and he says, remember kids, stay in school, don't do drugs, this is harmful, don't search for this content. So what does that mean? That in America you can access all that, and in China this is completely closed off? Well, what it means is that the Chinese government has figured out that what is on TikTok is extremely harmful for its youth. They have no problem showing it here to American kids. They have no problem, sowing this kind of discord and spreading these kinds of messages. But when it comes to their own citizens, this is not allowed, and they do enforce the laws very strictly over there against Douyin and against ByteDance, the company that runs this.
And we know, of course, kids' brains, their prefrontal cortex is not fully formed anyway till they're, I think, 24 now. We used to think it was 22. So they're no match for this propaganda machine. And no match. And we also know from the Surgeon General's warning last year, he basically made a proclamation that all social media was causing serious mental harm and imposed other safety risks to kids. But we can see now, even just in the little while that we've had, that TikTok is very clearly different than the other, companies like Google, or I'm sorry, Instagram, Meta, and gosh, I guess any of the others, right? And we're trying to rein those in, aren't we, Rick? I recently wrote an article called Treat Big Tech Like Big Tobacco, because when the Surgeon General warning came out many years ago that tobacco is harming your health, Big Tobacco was actually, they had to start funding in their settlements huge public awareness campaigns to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And we can certainly talk about what we're doing legislatively on all these platforms, basically calling them to be more accountable and responsible. But we really can't do that, right, with TikTok. So once this divestiture happens, and if they actually do follow what we're asking them to do, can TikTok then operate in America if it's separated from ByteDance?
The answer is yes, it can. And it is a 20% threshold. And the big difference, and as Donna, working with you and others on all the child safety stuff, and I would hear these arguments from some members of Congress, but people definitely who were supporters of TikTok say, well, if you take care of, we're no different than WhatsApp, and no different than Snap or Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. And the big difference is, one, all the concerns we have about social media in general is because they're putting profits ahead of children. And here we have a company who doesn't really care about profits. This is a mind control entity from a foreign adversary. So you can't stop them the way we're going to hopefully put a dent with the KOSA bills and the COPPA 2.0 and the Earn It Act. And so those are completely separate that don't address the national security concerns. Once an investiture happens, then we will have the ability to look internally, the U.S. companies or entities that are not housed in a foreign adversary country, is how the legislation works, and be able to have better control of how it's operating in a way, because we have a First Amendment here, and so you can have awful but lawful, and there's nothing, someone could buy TikTok and continue to have Chinese propaganda if they believe it and it's U.S. controlled. We can't stop that. But what we can stop is a foreign adversary having the ability to have access to U.S. citizens and have that type of control. And that's the big difference. So once the divestiture happens, one of the things I think will have to happen is they're going to have to get rid of the algorithm. And the reason is there's so many backdoors in the algorithm, and their ability to control the algorithm from afar through the use of bot farms and other technological means, they will know how to do that. So we have to do our due diligence to make sure that does not happen. So, and I do think that U.S. companies are going to be more in line with ensuring that our children are protected, because I think that's where most people want to be. Even the companies that we fight all the time, I think in their heart of hearts, they know we're right. They just have stockholders and investors to appease. And so, they make different decisions.
We're moving the needle, Rick, because of a lot of public pressure, Congress, bipartisan, nonpartisan. They're like, enough is enough. All right, you've got to put safety of children first over your profits. You can have profits, but you gotta be accountable. You gotta do the right thing. So we started the show with the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I see the good until the end. But it sounds like, Jeff and Rick, is there anything good about TikTok? Can it be used safely now?
I'll a couple of things on that. So the big way of helping protect children online is content moderation. That is critical. And content moderation is really three pieces in order to do that. And Donna, you remember this from my MySpace days when you and I worked together on MySpace. And when you have content moderation, you first have to have a policy. And you talk about, here's all these great policies that are in place, and all the social network sites. We have all these great policies. That's wonderful. The second part is a technological tool to help implement those policies. And are they using technological tools to help implement those policies? And what we found across social networking sites, and I highlight Reddit as one of the worst, because I'll get to the third piece of this, is that they really don't. They have not invested in the technological tool to enforce their policies. The last one is humans, people looking and ensuring that the technological tools are working in a way that helps implement the policy. And this is where companies like Reddit completely fail. They have volunteer moderators. And so, and then they say, we have no responsibility over the moderators. So if the moderators are uploading CSAM, go after the moderators of people uploading. We have no control, and we're protected by Section 230. And so it's all three of those pieces. And what KOSA does in a lot of ways is it addresses those three pieces. But here's what's really interesting in content moderation. Until about 3 months ago, the head of content moderation for TikTok was based in Ireland. And he reported directly to the general counsel of ByteDance, not to the general counsel of TikTok, not to the CEO of TikTok, but to the general counsel of ByteDance, which means that the content policies, the content moderation policies, were coming down from ByteDance, not from TikTok. And I think that's why you see a lot of the harms that we've seen in terms of the geopolitical issues.
Thank you. I just want to clarify for our audiences. You mentioned CSAM for everyone. That is child sexual abuse material, which is what we're now calling, what we used to call child pornography. And KOSA is the Kids Online Safety Act that we are working on as well, that came out of the Senate and House now. So Jeff, back to you. I'm going to ask you, I think we all kind of understand how this is impacting our kids, but can a politician, I mean, for instance, the White House, the Biden White House, and other politicians and businesses and NGOs are using TikTok because they see the value of reaching huge audiences. Can they do that safely?
So that is, I think, the key question coming up in the election. So the first time that we really saw TikTok emerge as an election tool was in the last midterm election. That was the one where, it was John Fetterman versus Dr. Oz and so forth. There were these celebrity show-offs happening, throughout the country, and TikTok being very much a celebrity-oriented, a very visual social media network opened up many new doors for lawmakers, for candidates to reach a new audience, to reach Gen Z. So, this is where it started getting tricky because at the same time, the national security, agencies in America, the law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C., were already sounding the alarm on TikTok, just as our candidates for public office were beginning to rely on it, in a much more widespread way than has been used before. I don't think that in the coming election, any candidate can use TikTok in a safe way. I think that as both Rick and I have demonstrated, it is a ticking time bomb. It is something that is set to go off at any moment because we've already seen what it's capable of, especially with those teenagers who are calling Congress and threatening to kill people, to kill members of Congress. Imagine that on the scale of an election, and that's what's worrisome. The other worrisome scenario, coming from China and having been in East Asia for so long, one of the things that I could say with great confidence is that when the Chinese Communist Party says that they're going to do something, they truly mean that they're going to do it. I think that there's a tendency in America, we live in a democracy. It's a liberal democracy. We have freedom of speech and checks and balances, and I think that we tend to forget that our adversaries out there, these are authoritarian police states, and when the government says something, that means it happens. It must happen. It's not like here where a senator can stand up and oppose it, and then the House of Representatives can put their own law. Like, we have a much more chaotic and open system by design. So when the Chinese government says we're going to invade Taiwan, when they actually say that they're making plans to invade Taiwan and they're sending fighter jets at Taiwan and also at the Senkaku Islands in Japan, sending ships into the South China Sea, this is all geopolitical, but it's very important because if China starts a war, and there is a strong likelihood of that happening, TikTok is going to be its main tool for propaganda. Now, people might say that's alarmist. There are often people who say, you shouldn't warmonger, you shouldn't predict war. But to that, I say, well, nobody thought that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. I mean, I remember I was in Ukraine covering the war, and it goes back a long time. Back in 2014, Russia annexed a part of Ukraine, turned it into its own territory without an actual invasion. And everybody said, it's going to end there. It's not going to go any further. But it did. And we had the signs all along. Putin was saying, I'm going to invade Ukraine. And everybody said, you're not going to invade Ukraine. That's crazy. Well, now China is saying, we're going to invade Taiwan. It's going to happen. And people are saying about China, oh, come on, that's not going to happen. I think that they're just bluffing. We have to take them at their word. I think we're already at a point where we have to anticipate that a war could very well happen. And that's why we need to go through with this divestment now before it becomes a serious problem.
Can I just add to that, Donna? Because I would argue too that the fact that they have control of TikTok increases the chances of a armed conflict. And the reason is because they know that they can manipulate U.S. public opinion. So they're going in from the standpoint that before we invade, we can do a couple of things. One, we could start putting things out that increase the amount of suicide that our kids are having, right? Some type of, because they know all these kids that are vulnerable already, right? You just saw, the data is there that shows vulnerable kids can be impacted by TikTok. So they have that going. And they also know they have a powerful tool to then weaponize the data to have massive disinformation going into the United States. We will not have that going into China. We will not be able to manipulate the Chinese public policy the way that they're going to do that here. And so when your question about elected officials using TikTok or NGOs using TikTok, they're adding to the harm. And I understand the reason from a political perspective. I'm running a campaign. Yes, there's 170 million people. It's neat. It's great. But remember, they're using that data to be used against us in the political warfare. And I just want to read this quote because this is fundamental to this conversation that we were just having. And this is from the Chinese military textbook quote of Chinese leader Xi Jinping saying, "The crumbling of a regime always starts in the realm of ideas. Political upheaval and the toppling of a regime could occur in a single night, but changing the way people think is a long-term process. Once the front lines of human thought have been broken through, other defensive lines also become hard to defend." That's what TikTok is all about, is breaking down these barriers. When we hear children say that is no different that of the Chinese having access to our data and the US government, we have a huge problem. Because as Jeff just pointed out, there are massive differences. I guarantee you, if they shut down, TikTok in China, there's no court process that we've set up for TikTok here in the US to go through. It's either yay or nay. And they are using our liberal democracy and our Constitution and our other tools and trying to use it against us. And that's why this is a national security threat.
So let me, I want to get down and drill down to our issue of what do parents do on who already have kids using TikTok. All right, we're going to cover that. And also, how do parents respond to their kids who can't wait to get on TikTok? But before I do that, I'm going to ask you this question. We see what's happening around the nation at colleges, the pro-Hamas protests. Do we have any data as to whether or not TikTok is playing into this?
Yes. Their data from Rutgers shows that the amount of pro-Hamas content is 50-1 in terms of pro-Israel content. And on Instagram, it's basically 50-50. And so we have the data is out there that shows that TikTok is pushing the narrative that they want. And the way TikTok works, as I mentioned, is if I put a hashtag Hamas or pro-Palestine hashtag, my video will be seen by so many more people than if I do a hashtag pro-Israel. And that is all generated by the algorithm, and the thumb is on the scale by the Chinese government to encourage that to happen.
Well, after the October 7th attacks in Israel, when 1,200 innocent people died at the hands of Hamas, guess who reemerged and reappeared on TikTok? It was Osama bin Laden, our old enemy. Somebody on TikTok posted a video of him and his so-called letter to America. The letter to America was an old video that he published that he sent to American government offices after 9/11, and it was his statement. He was sitting there in a cave, allegedly in Afghanistan, we don't know where, with his AK-47, and he was explaining in his letter to America why the 9/11 attacks were necessary. This letter to America started spreading like wildfire on TikTok. Gen Z was picking it up, and people were, they were sending it to each other, and they were writing comments such as, I'm just reading here. They were saying, "This guy's pretty good. I like his ideas. This is not bad. We should read more of Osama bin Laden. Why didn't we think of Osama bin Laden before?" So that's just sampling right there. That's TikTok. That's what TikTok is, and that's why we're now in the predicament that we are today. Now imagine that in a war with China.
Yeah, it's really scary. Everyone, every parent, every American, actually every non-communist should be very concerned about this, because this isn't just happening in America. It's happening in any country that has the Chinese controlled version of TikTok. So let's come to now, what's our advice to parents? What I found really interesting, you're not going to be able to see this, but this is a bunch of information put out by TikTok on how to keep our community safe. 10 ways we protect the privacy and safety of our younger community members. Keeping TikTok a safe and supportive place for families and teens, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So I hope we're convincing our audiences that parents need to be very concerned about this. So what can parents do for those parents whose kids are already using TikTok? What advice do you give them? How do they start engaging with them to help them understand this isn't just any social media platform?
Yeah, I'm not going to tell a parent how to parent. I have two boys. I wouldn't want someone telling me what to do, but I can tell you what I did with my own children. I explained them the national security threat from the very early days and of TikTok, that this was a big problem. That this was a data collecting entity that is going to be used against us in the future. And I care about your future, not just your safety and being online and what data is being collected. That's a broader conversation all parents should have. But in this particular case, that is a national security threat. And it's no different than when, I'm sure when they raise the age of cigarettes to 18 or to 21 now, and you're telling your kids don't smoke. And they're like, but mom and dad, I love to have a cigarette. I was like, no, I mean, you don't. It's harmful to your health, right? And those are the conversations we have to have. It's hard because all their friends are on it. All their friends are doing it. So I want to do it too. We've heard that, for generations now. That's not new, but we need to make sure that we're parents, be parents and help their kids. What I'm most worried about are the kids who don't have parents who care. That's where the real problem comes, the vulnerable kids. And those are the kids that in a national security state that could be the biggest threat because they don't see a way out. And that scares me more than what a lot of parents are doing to help protect their kids online.
Jeff, you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. So let's put it this way. So when I was working in Congress, I was at the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That's one of the committees where everybody is in either the diplomacy field, they're representing America overseas, or they're working in national security, trying to protect American interests. Every parent who I knew, who I worked with, banned TikTok in the House. They said that their kids were not allowed to use TikTok, that they had explained both the threats to national security and also their own well-being. But in my time, within that world, I did not meet a single person who permitted TikTok to be used by their kids or in their home. So, if the national security circle of America and, the foreign policy diplomacy field of America is not using TikTok, I think that's a good reason just not to use TikTok.
Right. So it's important then that parents, I'm going to glean here, that parents are very honest with their kids about the dangers of TikTok that is controlled by a Chinese company, ByteDance, and the Chinese Communist Party. The threat of national security, which is all of our futures, the threat of America, and then also their own personal safety. And that there are other platforms that don't pose those kinds of threats that TikTok does really as an adversary to the United States of America. Now, for parents, if you've already got your kid, maybe they're a star on TikTok. God, that's a tough one. I can just tell you, as a safety advocate for 30 years, I'm going to just share with you our recommendations about keeping kids safe in general on social media. And that is what we call safety rules and software tools. This is all for parents. On the rules side is have regular conversations about what your kids are doing online. And I would put this in a priority conversation about what your kids are doing online. And if they're not already on TikTok, great. Let them know why it's not a wise decision. And hopefully after you've heard this conversation, you all will be able to decide as a family that this is not the way we're going to go. But for those kids who are already there, again, have those conversations. and keep the lines of communication open, because we know this is highly addictive. And anytime you take away an addictive platform, an addictive device, or whatever it is, you're going to meet with a lot of resistance. So I think, having those regular communications, understanding that this is addiction, that there are addictive algorithms here, and that this may not be easy conversations to have. And for those who decide to let your kids stay on TikTok, they do have parental control tools. They do have some tools. What we always recommend is turn the tools on. Now, this is on every single social media platform your kids are using. They don't always work and they don't always have them. But if they have parental control tools, turn on the filters, the monitoring technologies, and the time limits, and spend time with them while they're using these platforms. But again, I hope after you've heard these conversations from our two amazing experts, Rick and Jeff, that you too will think twice about allowing your kids to stay on TikTok. So any final words, Rick and Jeff? Thank you both, by the way, for joining us. Let us know how people can find you online.
Thank you, Donna. So I am on my website, jeffreykane.net. That's my personal website, and that's where I publish articles and commentaries on TikTok. Also, I'm now the policy director at the Tech Integrity Project. So we are working on the opposite problem of trying to stop American tech companies from going to China and hurting our national security here at home. So that's techintegrityproject.org.
Thank you. And Rick?
You can find me on TikTok. No, just kidding. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I post all my materials. I don't have my own website. I let Microsoft control my life, but on LinkedIn, so you can find me there.
And you also have a TikTok coalition. So what's that website?
Yeah, the TikTokcoalition.org. And there's information there that will go a little bit more in depth of what the concerns are. We have videos of members of Congress talking about TikTok and why it's a national security threat. We have articles and other information. Then you can reach us there as well.
Well, thanks to both of you, and thanks to our audience for joining us. We hope that you will share this very important podcast. And we'll be back next time. But I just want to remind you that at Enough is Enough, we are fighting for you to let your voices be heard in Washington with these big tech companies. And we're fighting to make the internet safer for children and families. We hope that you will sign up for our free newsletter where we keep you up to date on all of these issues. And you can find us at enough.org and also on our internetsafety101.org website. There we have broken down every risk that kids encounter online, from pornography to trafficking to cyberbullying, social media, online gaming, all of it. And we've got free information for you, how to talk to your kids about these dangers, how to protect your kids from these dangers. And we even have little quick guides where you can where you can recognize warning signs, have conversation starters, etc. So we're here to help you protect your kids. Thank you so much. I'm Donna Rice Hughes.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.